Yo YouTube, what is good? It's your man Ribs from Doing Film Things. Every single week I drop a new video about film photography, so if that's your thing, definitely go ahead and subscribe. This week I'm doing something very exciting, and that is printing some Cinestill 800T. Very excited to do this because, Cinestill has that great allure and that charm that everybody really likes. And a lot of these images that I've taken with Cinestill are usually in very low lit scenarios with lots of ambient light and lots of different neon things and just, all kinds of things with character. So I'm very curious to see how that stuff comes through on print, and I'm definitely welcome for the challenge. I've only been printing things that are lit outdoors, so I got kind of used to that process and that thinking. Printing something that's indoors, you have to kind of shift your thinking a bunch and start to think about all of the different lighting components in the scene. So I'm very much looking forward to messing around with that. All right, enough of the chit chat. Let's go ahead and jump into the darkroom. Alright y'all, so I'm in the darkroom right now, and basically I'm going to start hooking up my negatives. I already know exactly which ones I want to print, and there's two different ones from two different Cinestill rolls, shot probably 5 or 6 months in between. One was here from London and one was from New York, so really excited to print both of these because they actually showcase a lot of cool lights. Neither one actually has that really obvious halo thing, which is good, because the halo thing for me, honestly, I don't think I like it that much. It's cool, it's kind of different, but at the same time, I don't know, I just feel like it's overrated. People get really excited about it, I'm not sure why. But nonetheless, I'm gonna showcase two different images with lots of good light here and lots of colors. So hopefully they should look pretty cool. So this first print is actually a portrait of a friend of mine. I met her through some of my other friends, and basically a group of us went out one night to do some pics and just do a photo walk. And we walked around London and kind of just chilled, had a couple beers. But we found this really cool parking garage, and parking garage always have these great lights inside. So very quickly I said, hey, can you just stand right there and kind of look off into the distance a bit? And I captured this portrait, and basically you have her lit by kind of the ambient light, and then behind her you have all these really cool indoor lights of the actual parking garage. And I think it just looks epic. And on top of that, it looks very cinematic. I feel kind of funny saying the portrait is cinematic, because I feel like that's the obvious thing to say when you're talking about Cinestill, but I think in this case it really does instantly create this mood that you kind of see from movies. So I really appreciate this portrait, and in fact I actually cropped one when I did a digital scan in that classic film crop that you have in the movies, and it really made this portrait look pretty damn cool. Kind of had an anamorphic vibe, even though the image itself was not made by an anamorphic lens, but it's a bit wide of a picture, and I don't know, it just gives off that exact vibe that you would expect from a really cool urban gritty movie. So I'm gonna load this one first into the enlarger here, and we'll do a couple test prints and then get my actual print out, and then I'll give you my thoughts once I have a very steady print going. And then after this we'll do the other one. I'm going to pour my developer into the Jogo tank, and nothing happens there when you pour it in because there's basically a reservoir on the inside, and when you tip it over then that leaks through on the inside. So it's nice because then it kind of gives you a moment to kind of get your stuff together. So I'm going to put the cover on here and then put the Jogo tank on the rollers, and then now we start the clock. So I finish developing my image, so now I'm going to go ahead and pour all of the developer back into the container. And unfortunately you can't reuse this, which is really sad, because you would use a lot less chemicals, but each developer pour is basically one shot. So I got the developer out of the container, and now I'm going to go ahead and pour the bleach fix into this and then do the same 45-second process. So now I'm done doing that cycle, and I'm going to pour this Blix out, and it's actually reusable. So I can pour this back into this little container measuring cup here, and for the next batch I'll reuse the exact same one, and there won't be any problem. And now we rinse the inside of this and get our paper out. So I've rinsed the paper that's in here, and now I'm going to pull it out of the container. And here is our first test print. This is the shorter exposure, and then this is the longer exposure. I only did two in the first one just because I kind of know where my settings are going to be given how I set up my enlarger. I keep it consistent for every print, so it's basically somewhere around 7 to 8 seconds usually. This side here is 6 seconds, and this side here I believe is 8. So looking at this, I think I definitely want somewhere in the middle for this print. So for this image right here, it's looking a little bit too blue and just with a hint of green. So I'm probably gonna let more yellow and more magenta go in the image. That way we'll start to shift the image from being so blue to having a bit more warmth in it. Overall, it'll still be a fairly cool image, but this is way too cool right now. I definitely want some warmer colors to come back in there because that'll help saturate the lipstick and the yellow hat and all of that. So I'm gonna make those changes now and then we'll do our next test print. All right, y'all, so I went ahead and did 2 more test prints and I changed the color in between. So I exposed one, put it in the tank, closed it, turned the lights on, changed the settings, and then I exposed another sheet of paper, put it in the tank, closed it, and then did my normal developing cycle with both test prints here. So I'm gonna take both out and then we're gonna see how the color changes that I made affected the print. Everything was done at 7 seconds exposure time. All right, so we've got our new exposures here. Basically, there's a key difference in this picture right here versus the rest. Of all the prints that I've done so far, this one has the most magenta peeking through to it. And it's very noticeable when you look at the lips. She is wearing some sort of red lipstick, and the red is the most saturated in this image compared to the rest. So I think we're moving in the right track. Also, if you look at the skin on her face, it's starting to get a bit more kind of blood color, I would say. And by that I mean like you can tell that her skin is alive and that there's blood flowing through it just a bit in this magenta one here. So I'm gonna do another print. I'm gonna remove some of the yellow and I'm gonna add a bit more magenta and we'll see where that takes us. Yo, so I think we're getting there pretty good right now. I did 2 more test prints and I messed with the magenta and the yellow. I allowed just a bit more yellow, unlike what I said I was gonna do earlier. And for the magenta, I actually went as low as 10 points of a difference between what I had before and what I did now. So I actually think we're pretty much there. If you look at these 2 exposures right here, this is the one that allows just a bit more magenta, and this is the one that allows a lot more magenta. And I really like where this one is. Basically, now her jacket is looking a bit green, which is what it was in real life. And her skin, if you compare it to all the other ones, her skin here has a bit of hue to it. It's got just a bit of that red and like very, very light hint of yellow hue. And the lips are looking really bold and red as well. More importantly, this yellow hat now looks yellow. It doesn't look washed out. And it's got a bit more saturation to it. So I think we're doing pretty good here. I'm tempted to do another test print and kind of mess with the colors just a bit more. So I think that's what I'm gonna do, just 1 more round. But if that doesn't get me what I want, then I think I'm pretty happy with this right here. Let's go ahead and do that one now. So I did those 2 other exposures that I thought would maybe make sense. And ultimately I decided they're not really necessary. I think the last exposure I showed you has the right settings and is the one we're gonna go with. I'm gonna go back to the settings that I had in the previous example, and that's what I'm gonna make my prints of. So let's go make our final prints. All right, y'all, here's the final print. I just went ahead and did a final exposure at 7 seconds and with the settings that I preferred. And here we go. Pretty happy with how that looks. Definitely has that cinematic appeal and the lights in the back just look great. And I think this is definitely a great way to use the Cinestill 800T. You know, this is a very low light film shot right here, but it is ambient light with the streets lights. So, you know, there's definitely some light reflecting off the face as you can see, but there's really cool kind of moody light in the background. I'm really happy with how this turned out. So now I think we got pretty close to what I think this would have looked like in real life as well. So I'm happy with this. I'm gonna go hang it up and then squeegee it, and then we're good to go to the next print. So I loaded the new negative into the enlarger, and I'm gonna bust out this print really quickly. The settings I feel are probably gonna be very similar, although the old image was definitely a bluish, colder image. This one might be a bit warmer since it's indoors in some tungsten lighting. I'm not gonna show you every single step as to how I make this print, but I'm definitely gonna show you kind of a quick breeze through, and then we'll talk about the final result at the end. All right, y'all, so this print was actually a lot of fun. There's some dodging and burning required because of the way the highlights are in this image. And the highlights themselves are actually a neon sign with a lot of color. So it's very interesting to kind of play with, but here's what I got. You see in this image here, there's a lot of color, there's definitely some skin tone, and there's kind of a mix of tungsten, but also the neon sign lighting. Here you've got the actual subject, and as I mentioned, this is a portrait, so I love the exposure on him. It's a very nice, balanced, kind of soft exposure. The skin's looking proper, and it's not too bright, not too dark. It's kind of a nice somewhere in the middle. And he's looking off to the side, which I think adds a nice move to the image. And then behind him, as I mentioned, there's this really cool neon sign that's got some Chinese characters on it. We were actually at a noodle bar when we went to take this photo. So I actually had to burn that part of the image for quite some time. The overall exposure, the first general exposure, was 11 seconds. And then to get those highlights to where they are there, I actually had to keep counting until 25 seconds. So all in all, I had to basically burn that part of the image for 14 extra seconds beyond the overall exposure. The entire setup from beginning to end was 25 seconds of exposure time at any part of the image. So it's a really long print, and I think that speaks to how bright those highlights are. When I metered this image, I think I did it with an automatic camera, so I metered for his face, and therefore that's where I got the really nice exposure on him, but then the highlights are definitely blown out. The beauty of printing is, though, you can bring back highlights so well. So I find that if you want to expose images for print, and you know you're going to be printing, you probably want to expose your image for the shadows in camera, because if the highlights are blown out, there's a really good chance that you'll be able to bring them back with some really good burning. So I feel like I'm really getting the hang of this, but Cinestill always is a challenge, given that the types of pictures I take with Cinestill tend to involve a lot of different types of lights and a lot of colors as well, but of course in low light. So having to balance all of that in your image, plus get the proper exposure, it's not the easiest thing. Daylight shots are much easier to print because I find that the light is much more consistent. In these Cinestill images shot indoors, there's just all kinds of stuff going on, and therefore you really have to pay close attention to shadows and the highlights, but then also the colors, and then of course the overall lighting. So if you're going to be printing Cinestill, I hope you're ready for the challenge. So I'm super happy with how these prints came out. Check them out. They're very different prints and they capture very different scenes, but I love that I picked kind of these two to show off really what capabilities Cinestill has. I love how both of these images turned out, and I really think Cinestill did fantastic in capturing the scenes as I remember them. Yo, so what do you think? Did I capture the essence of Cinestill well on these prints? I definitely had a really good time printing these, and I was very excited about the challenge, and I think I did pretty good. Let me know what you think in the comments. It's hard to shoot Cinestill right now in London since we're in summertime and the sun goes down really, really late. So I'm kind of looking forward to the fall when the sun goes down a lot earlier, and then there's a lot of time to be outdoors at night in order to take images. So probably won't be doing a lot more of this in the meantime, but definitely looking forward to doing a lot more Cinestill shooting and then of course printing later on in the future. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to be doing a bunch of guest printing pretty soon. So I've got a couple people that I'm in contact with who are going to send me their negatives, and then I'm going to interpret them my way and then print them. I'm going to try for all of these to not look at any of the digital versions first, because I want kind of like a clean slate in my mind. So that way when I print, I'm really kind of owning my own perspective as opposed to trying to duplicate what somebody else did with the scan. If you like this video, please go ahead and leave me a like. If you want to see more videos like this and also see those videos that I just mentioned that I will be making in the future, please go ahead and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. That's all I got, y'all. Until the next video, peace.